Good afternoon, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day and God bless you. Alright, let's get into the news. Oh, is Trump really the leader of the Republican Party? Well, losers, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are going to be the ones to force that question. To losers who lost big in their primary races, not even general election races. That means conservatives didn't want them. By the way, that people of Brazil and the military are working together to contest the results. I find that sort of unification very important. Imagine if we knew that we had the military on our side. What a different tale today possibly would be. Let's talk about the great luck that the Democrats have. I mean, this one's great. Okay. We've got something for you. If you're looking for irregularities in your he's looking for irregularities. Okay, check this out. Columbia, New Hampshire is a town with 735 people according to the state website from 2019 and it says that the population in 2010 was 798. So they lost some people between 2010 and 2022. Okay, and then if you go by the 2020 census, so in 2010, they had 798 and 2019. They had 735, they lost about 63 people. Okay. Now according to the 2020 census, which is after 2019, their population went down to 695. So they are a town whose population is on the decline. However, because the Democrats have such great luck, Maggie Hassan, Democrat, an unpopular one at that for senator, got 1,100 votes in the community of Columbus, New Hampshire. Again, the population is hovering somewhere under 700. But the person running got not just all 700 of those people, but apparently another phantom 400 people. Isn't that interesting? What great luck it is to be a Democrat. How about this article in Nevada was on TV and he said he was on with Tucker Carlson. And he said they have this in the bag that his opponent would need 63% of the remaining 84,000 votes in Clark County, Nevada. That's where Las Vegas is to catch up with him in the vote count. And lo and behold, what happened? Lexall opponent got exactly 63% of those remaining 84,000 votes 2 days later. What great luck. I mean, what great luck. A Republican says my competitor would need 63% to beat me and 2 days later, they got exactly 2% on those 63%. Alright. So we were talking about the good luck that the Democrats have. Now, let's get back to Donald Trump being Speaker of the House. Is that something that he may be announcing on the 15th? Probably that he's going to be running for president. But isn't it interesting? How I'm gonna go back to where Brett Raskin said he's concerned about President Trump becoming Speaker of the House. What are your thoughts, folks? Trump's Speaker of the House and then run for president. So he can effectuate a change from within? Or what would it just be TDS is so off the hook that it would derail any sort of anything getting done with him as Speaker of the House? What are your thoughts? Please put it down below. Okay, so we talked about Maggie Hassan. What great luck. She has getting more votes in this one town than they said there was a glitch that was fixed. But the Secretary of State website so shows those 1106 votes from the town that has less than 700 people. Nothing to see here. Move along. What great luck that Lexall Democrat opponent 2 days later gets exactly all the votes in Clark County, Nevada, they need to win. Isn't that interesting? And got Chucky Schumer saying that the midterms were a vindication for the Democrats' agenda. Oh, why is that? Because Catherine Cortez Masto in New York got just enough that she needed that she passed Adam Lexall to get 48.7 to 48.2%. And guess what? They immediately called her even though the race wasn't won, all the ballots were counted. But as soon as she took the lead, they called it for her and Chucky, she goes on and says, "We have kept the Senate." Isn't that interesting? Now remember when they said that Lauren Burke was losing? Well, she pulled the hat in Colorado. Now you see how great the Democrats' luck is, right? More votes than people in the town. They get the exact amount they need 2 days later to win. And then what happens with Laura Ann Boebern? She takes the lead of what is called how to do. It triggers a recount. Quote, the marketer Buber's leaders within recount territory under Colorado election laws. The state conducts a mandatory recount of the election of victories within a half a percentage point. And in the most recent tally on Saturday, Bavard left with 50.17% of the vote to a halt opponents' 49.83%. So now they're going to have a recount, and it's going to take 35 days to complete. So we won't know for over a month. Isn't that interesting? So voters voted Democrat and were turned off because of the Republican leadership response to the attack on Paul Pelosi, which is really a lover's spat. Wow. That has to be the most convoluted reason I've heard yet. For how the Democrats did so well, in an election where 75% of the people don't even like their policies. But that's just the luck. That's just the luck of the Democrats. People like them, but they still come out and vote for them. They can be losing in the polls, not even campaigning. They could be starving people with mandates, with high inflation, with high energy prices, but people will still love Joe Biden and the Democrats' policies and vote for them. And if they weren't going to vote for them, once they saw how the Republicans responded to the attack on Paul Pelosi, that was the camel, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. People said I was going to vote for MAGA. But the way they disrespected Paul Pelosi, I think I'm now going to vote for Democrats because of that. Wow. I don't know what's more desperate, CNN having Paul, Nancy Pelosi on. By the way, supposedly it wasn't coordinated. But George W. Bush and Barack Obama are holding back-to-back conferences this coming week, on Monday and disinformation. Because we know that Obama was above the board and absolutely, totally right, didn't lie about anything. There was no nothing with Eric Holder. There was no Fast and Furious. There was no lying and hiding about pallets of cash going to Iran. So of course, he could definitely talk about democracy and disinformation. And George W. Bush. Oh, of course, there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Of course, there was no nothing to look at, nothing to see, nothing to question when it came to 9/11. Tower 7 HTTPS conspiracy theory stuff. We know that if there were any two recent presidents that can absolutely, with moral authority, talk about democracy and disinformation, it's George W. Bush and Obama. Anyhow, four presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama are holding back-to-back democracy competence in the days after Donald Trump makes what he's teased will be a major announcement. Oh, that's the impetus for this. What a coinkydink. Now, what if that announcement actually isn't that he is going to run for president, but that he is possibly going to accept a nomination to be Speaker of the House? That probably wouldn't be a good announcement until the House is totally sewed up. Because remember, doesn't matter. There were a week almost past the election. It's not election day anymore. It's election week. Okay. Talking about election week, we'll get to that in a second. But talking about President Trump being Speaker of the House, there seems to be quite a bit of murmuring in D.C. that scaring the Democrats about there actually might be a reality or teeth or some real meat behind this idea of Trump becoming Speaker of the House. Here's Jamie Raskin on Face the Nation on CBS today to discuss the midterm elections with Margaret Brennan, the host, and this is what comes up. The question of every election is, who is it a referendum on? The assumption of Republicans was it's got to be a referendum on the party in power. It has to be. The party in power is doing a terrible job and it's unified. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, all the bad stuff is their fault. In many of these races, the referendum turned into a referendum not on Joe Biden and the Democrats but into a referendum on the particular weird out-of-the-box candidates that Republicans chose, in many of these areas, candidates who made many independents feel insecure. And this was a major problem. It was a serious problem for the Republicans. Well, folks, we got to recap that midterm 2022 election. What happened? What went wrong? How do Republicans fix it? And what kind of opportunities lie ahead for them? If they do, this video is sponsored by Ring. What went wrong is the big question, because here's the thing, it was supposed to be a red wave, or at least a red tide. And instead it turned into a red trickle. By which I mean, it looks like the Republicans are going to end up with bare control of the House, a very, very small majority, as opposed to what should have been a sweeping majority. They may end up in control of the Senate. That is going to depend, it looks like, on a Georgia runoff, which doesn't look particularly amazing, because it's Herschel Walker against Raphael Warnock, and Walker doesn't happen to be a particularly strong candidate. So what went wrong? What exactly happened here? And the answer is actually fairly obvious, that Republicans ran a lot of crappy candidates where Republicans ran strong candidates who are not associated with out-of-the-box crazy ideas. They won, and they won big. The big contrast in 2022 is between Florida, where Republicans absolutely cleaned up, and say the Georgia gubernatorial race, where Brian Kemp did really well against Stacey Abrams, or Texas, where Greg Abbott did really well against Beto O'Rourke. It Democrats for tons of money into these places. The contrast is those places versus all the other places where the Republicans wildly underperforming here. I'm talking about Pennsylvania, where they ran Doug Mastriano, who got absolutely smoked by Josh Shapiro in the gubernatorial race, or New Hampshire, or Don Balda, got smoked by Maggie Hassan. These are the races where things should have gone differently, because all the fundamental underlying factors were in favor of Republicans here. A 43% approval rating for the current president of the United States, 75% of Americans, and exit polls saying that the economy was moving in the wrong direction. 28% approval rating. For Joe Biden among independents, 40-year high in inflation, chaos in the Middle East, breaking out again, thanks to Iran, tons of stuff happening in the world right now. None of it particularly good for the Democrats, which is why if you looked at the polls, all the movement in the last week was toward the Republicans. What went wrong? The answer is Republicans assumed in a lot of these races that the fundamentals against Joe Biden were so strong, they could literally go down to the homeless shelter, pick up some people and put them up for races. That is not how politics works. And this is what the independents showed. So many of those same independents who didn't like Joe Biden voted for a Democratic candidate, because they looked at the Republican candidate, and they said, this is not somebody I can trust with governance. This is the constant story. The more solid the Republican candidate, the better the candidate did. I know this seems like tough stuff, but it really is not. Republicans made a bad habit of, in primaries, picking candidates who seemed attractive because they were fight people, but they didn't actually guarantee the possibility of solid governance, solid sober stuff, once they were in office. Think of politics like a cake. And the cake has a couple elements. Got the cake. It's got the icing. Republicans are very attracted by the icing. We love the icing. The icing is the social culture war kind of stuff. The sexy stuff where you're fighting against the wild equity agenda of the Democrats or fighting against the trans thing of the children, all that kind of also super important, I think is great. You can have a great cake without the icing. But if the cake is icing, and what is underneath the icing is actually not cake. It's just a bag of flaming garbage, the icing and help. And so Republicans kept picking candidates where there was no evidence these people were going to be good at governing him in, like QAnon rallies 6 months beforehand. That is not going to win. And here's the thing, if you actually wish to see conservatives, when you need people to win their races, they need to win their races is not all that shocking. That was the big problem here. People got really happy about the underlying bad conditions for Democrats, and they assumed they could put up a bag of crap and that bag of crap would then be elected to high office. And that is typically not how it worked for Republicans. You have to demonstrate at best, like Ron DeSantis, they've got cake and really good governance. And you can do the icing really well. You can fight the media, you can fight to social issues, you can fight woke, corporatism, and all those things you can fight. But the cake has to be there. Or like Brian Kemp, who fought a few of the cultural issues, but more was just the cake. There wasn't like tons and tons of icing. It was mostly just cake. Or he made Mike DeWine in Ohio, who earned the trust of his population in Ohio to the extent he won over 60% of the vote in Ohio. J.D. Vance, by contrast, what about 53% of the vote because he's more controversial candidate. The question of every election is, who is it a referendum on? The assumption of Republicans was it's got to be a referendum on the party in power. It has to be the party in power is doing a terrible job and it's unified. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, all the bad stuff is their fault. In many of these races, the referendum turned into a referendum not on Joe Biden in the Democrats but into a referendum on the particular weird out-of-the-box candidates that Republicans chose in many of these areas, candidates who made many independents feel insecure. And this was a major problem. It was a serious problem for the Republicans. So what does that mean for 2024? That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. If you're up for it, I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for